All right, my name is Tim Ferriss, author of the 4-Hour Workweek, #1 New York Times bestseller, and the new 4-Hour Body. Here with Bodybuilding.com in Sacramento, California. We are at the Super Training Gym run by Mark Bell, and we are joined by his cast of freaks of nature and mutants in the world of powerlifting. The 4-Hour Body is really meant to be a choose-your-own-adventure guide to the human body, a hacker's guide to improving every facet of your physical appearance and performance, whether that's ultra-endurance, superhuman strength, rapid fat loss, sleep, sex, you name it, it covers it all. And for every chapter I did experiments on myself and also tested all of the science, the best science, in the field with as many as 200 test subjects. This video will show you some of the results and some of the findings. The reason that I started doing the testing was multifold. One of the reasons was the science, at least the supposed consensus for many things, didn't really hold up under field testing. So from age 18 forward, I have pretty much every workout recorded and compounded with that food logs. And now, certainly in the last few years, glucose measurements 24/7. I've put medical devices into my side as implants, done all of the guinea pig experiments so the readers don't have to. That leads us to where we are today. In this day and age, specifically in the last few years, the technology is so cheap, they're basic tools, very simple, inexpensive ways to test things for yourself and determine once and for all, over the span of a few weeks or a few months, what works for you and what doesn't. And then once you figure those things out, then you can kind of snap your fingers and make some pretty amazing things happen. Whether that's putting 100+ pounds on your deadlift in, let's say, 8 to 12 weeks, which is entirely achievable. For most people, if you're already at 800 pounds, different story, but most people aren't. You'll see some guys here who are there. And similarly, dropping body fat. People say you can't lose more than 2 pounds per week in body fat. Nowhere in the literature have I seen that supported. In fact, if you've got a lot of weight to lose, if you're not losing 5 pounds a week in the beginning, you're probably doing something wrong. I think one of the fundamental problems with most exercise or dietary changes is they say, here's what you need to do, go ahead and do it, and it's a set of instructions. The challenge there is that you're not addressing the behavioral change component. Both books are about testing assumptions and measuring the right things really, really well. When you want to achieve any goal, whether that's doing rack pulls with 650 pounds or working 4 hours a week and still producing the same amount of revenue per customer in your startup, the approaches are actually very, very similar. And I think another thing that people don't realize is my business experience is partially based on having owned and developed and run a sports nutrition company for 8 years, #1, which allowed me to interact with a lot of very high-level athletes. And second, I've been tracking my physical data for far longer than I've been tracking my time management. For that reason, I view the 4-Hour Workweek as having bought me permission to write this book, which was at its core the book I wanted to write the most. Ultimately, fitness, and we have to define that very specifically, I like to anyway, and diet and so forth are really the ultimate performance enhancers. If you transcend your own limitations, whether it's lifting, running, taking someone who's never run 5 miles and having them run 50 miles, when you exceed those impossible barriers, that transfers to everything else. So by really mastering your physical self, you master, I think, by extension, oftentimes without even trying everything else. And I don't think that's an exaggeration. So that's also one of the large motivations. I think that you can fix work, and you can fix work. If you fix the body, if you improve the body, just by almost irradiation, you affect everything else. My goal has been, and is always, to take something very, very complex or viewed as complex and reduce it down to as few pieces as possible, and then to say, here's what you have to do and why. And I think the why is very important. Most people do more than they should, and with the body, brute force doesn't always work very well in terms of volume. What it requires to flip those switches, to pull those triggers, to get the proper hormones and everything to cascade and get the results you want is surprisingly little. And I think that the more people realize that, the more people will be successful with their programs. I think that this book will really help train an army of very well-informed self-experimenters who will produce some huge discoveries. So my goal is to create a movement around people who feel like they're in control of their own bodies. All right, so what we're gonna do today, we are here at the Super Training Gym in Sacramento. Mark Bell and his entire team of mutants, and we will be observing a few things. We will be observing some of the best powerlifting training in the US, probably anywhere. and looking at some of the methods, many of which are based on Westside, where Mark trained for a very long time. And we'll also be looking at some of the approaches that I've used, if you're not a competitive powerlifter, to improve my deadlift more than 150 pounds. So many of the approaches are very counterintuitive, and I think they illustrate how testing assumptions can be very, very valuable and accelerate progress. And we will look at how to do all of it safely, which is very important when you're dealing with very, very large poundages, which you will see. So, without further ado, let's get started.